The vast majority of people in this country would never have heard of critical race theory but for the pandemic and but for at-home teaching, where the parents are looking in the monitor and going, what the hell did that teacher just say to my kid? Which is why I now support cameras in the classroom and have been pushing for that for 2 months. I figure, of course, what happened with this book is I was watching and writing and thinking and researching. I didn't come up with the title until about 3 months before I turned it in, because I'm writing about Marxism. I'm writing about, where does critical race theory come from? Where does this degrowth, phony climate change movement come from? Why is the border open? What is this weird transgender movement in our classrooms? Where is that coming from? What's that all about? And so I figured out what it's all about, where it all comes from. I provide the scholars and the writings, and I comment on who's doing it and so forth, because I don't think we can beat it and claw our way back unless we know exactly who the enemy is. And these are not adversaries. They're not opponents. They're the enemy.
Let's define American Marxism. What is it, and how does it differ from sort of traditional Marxism that you might find in Capital or something that Marx wrote himself?
That is a great question. I call it American Marxism because it's the Americanization of Marxism. Now, you don't see Joe Biden nationalizing buildings, walking around like Hugo Chavez did and say, see that building? That's now ours, that sort of thing. This is the Americanization of Marxism and the fundamentals. And I explain this in the first chapter. The oppressed and the oppressor, class warfare, you hear it come from Biden and the Democrats all the time. The rich and the poor, like the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. They go on about class warfare, caste systems they talk about. So they borrow heavily from Marx. They borrow heavily specifically from the Communist Manifesto. And you know Marx wrote, and Engels, a lot more than that. And the way that they talk and they think, they didn't just make this up. The war on American history. Joe Biden's war on American history, to abolish the 1776 Commission, to trash the report they put out, to attack American history, to attack the founders, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, federalism, separation of powers. These are all the things that were set up to create a constitutional republic. Well, what does Marx say? Destroy history. The world begins today. We're the ones in charge of what history is to say. History begins today. There is no good society unless it's a communist society. He even rejected socialists. He hated socialists because he felt they were halfway communists and they were interfering with the Grand Revolution. You know, when Lenin finally took over, he said, now what do we do? Because Marx doesn't tell them what to do once they win the revolution. So the revolution never ends, whether it's China and so forth and so on. So what is American Marxism? Critical theory, critical race theory, that's American Marxism. Imported into the United States by an individual by the name of Marcuse from the Franklin School in Berlin. He couldn't understand how the Nazis took over and the proletariat didn't rise up and impose communism. At the time, he escapes by the skin of his teeth. He comes to the United States of America. He works in seriatim for 3 different Ivy League schools who all give him tenure. And he hatches this critical theory, which is, simply put, in law schools and in law, it is the theory that law is corrupt because it's written by the people who are in control. So the victims, the minorities and so forth, they have to live in this suppressed society because the laws are written by the powerful. The laws are written by the dominant people. So a guy by the name of Derek Bell at Stanford Law and then Harvard Law, he takes that and he says, I'll take it one step further. Race. It should be not critical theory, critical race theory. Everything needs to be seen through the lenses of race. And when you look at the lenses of race, what do you see? A white dominant culture. And so all of our history is white. All of our laws are white. All of our policies are white. They're all intended to help the white man. And even when you have a civil rights movement and Supreme Court decisions, when you have a 1964-65 Civil Rights Act and EEOC and on and on and on, truly efforts to create a more perfect society, he argues that's a sham. That's all a sham. All that is intended to do is to enshrine the white dominant society. We have to destroy and overthrow that society. It's really critical Marxist theory that uses race as an excuse. Or the way I put it lately is, it's Louis Farrakhan dressed up as scholarship, but even worse, it's promoting Marxism. real quickly, look at climate change. There's a reason they went from the ice age to the heat age to climate change. They were trying to come up with some kind of nomenclature to disguise what they're really about. What are they about? A war on capitalism. It is the degrowth movement that was exported to the United States by communists in Europe. It is a degrowth movement. Look, attacked energy. The Green New Deal is about attacking material advancement and so forth in our country. So what I explain in the book, just briefly, is how each one of these efforts are intersectional, as they call it. And that is, each one of these efforts, they work together, they aggregate to build this movement, and they Americanize the Marxism to try and appeal to the popular culture and through the media.